king of Persia, king of Ahasuerus, who had a great feast for many. And they were drinking as much as they wanted to and all these type of things. And the king, he was kind of, getting drinking a lot. And he wanted the queen at that time, Queen Vashti, to come and just show her beauty to everyone because he was so proud of her beauty. But, she was having her own feast for her own people, for her own women. And she found it offensive for her to have to come and do that, so she didn't do it. And so the king and his advisors said, well, we can't allow this to stand. She's not going to obey the king, then the women in many households are going to give their husbands problems, so we need to do something. And so he passed this edict where the women were to respect the men in the household. But he also went about replacing Queen Vashti with someone else. And so the call was made for many women to come, and they got their beauty treatments and all these type of things, and to appear before King Ahasuerus, and he would choose one as queen. And that one who became queen was Esther. Mordecai was her cousin, but because her parents died, and Mordecai took her as his own daughter. And what he told her not to do is don't tell them that her family is Jews. So she never told who her family was as she rose to this great power of being queen of Persia. There was another man, and this man was the man Haman. He was an Agagite associated with the Amalekites. He was promoted to a high station, and everybody bowed to him in the king's gate. Only one person didn't bow to him, and that was Mordecai. It was a rule amongst the Israelites that they would not seek the peace of the Amalekites because of what the Amalekites did when Israel first came out of Egypt. The Amalekites were first to come to try to fight the Israelites and to stop them before they came towards the promised land. In verse 5 it says, now when Haman saw that Mordecai refused to bow low, and this is verse 5 in chapter 3, he refused to bow low and prostrate himself to him, Haman came filled with rage. But he despised the thought of doing away with Mordecai alone, for they had told him about Mordecai's people. So Haman began seeking to annihilate all the Jews who were in the entire realm of Ahasuerus, all of Mordecai's people. So Haman wasn't concerned about one person. He was not concerned about who had disrespected him in his mind. He wanted they. He wanted genocide. And you'll find this is the mindset of racists. They're not concerned about who, they want they. And so Haman went into the king, made his case before him to do this genocide on the 12th month of the year. That is the month Adar. And so he got the approval by the king, and they went and sent the message throughout all the kingdom that on the 12th month, the Jews were to be annihilated in every part of the kingdom of Persia. And Mordecai, when he learned of this, he ripped his garments apart and put on sackcloth and ashes, and he went out into the middle of the city crying out loudly and bitterly. Now when Esther found out about it, she tried to console Mordecai and sent him garments so he could put on, but he wouldn't accept it. But she wanted to find out what was going on, what happened. And Mordecai sent back word and told her that, the Jews are scheduled to be genocide on the 12th month. and that she needs to go in and talk to the king, and she need to realize that at a time like this is perhaps why she has risen to power, because of this situation that was about to happen. And that if she didn't do something, then it would also affect her too. Because Persian law, when a decree was signed, it could not be annulled. So the king signed this decree for the genocide of the Jews, not knowing that his wife, the queen, was a Jew. And so she had to go in there to talk to the king. The only problem is the king hadn't summoned her for 30 days. And you couldn't go into the courtyard unless you're summoned. And if you go without an invite, the only way that your life will be spared is if the king puts out the scepter to you. This is what she does. She goes in on the third day, and she puts on her royal robe. She looks the best she can. She goes in the courtyard of the king. The king is sitting there, and he sees her approaching. Now, he could have thought, well, hey, I can get a new wife now, because she know good and well, if I don't call her, and if I don't put out this scepter to her, she'll die. But he loves her. And so he puts out the scepter, the golden scepter, and she touches it, and he receives her visit. Chapter 5, it says, the king asked her, what is the matter, Queen Esther, and what is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom it will be granted to you. Esther replied, if it pleases the king, let the king along with Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him. And so this request was granted. Haman was told to come to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And verse 6 of chapter 5, he says, during the banquet of wine, the king said to Esther, what is your petition? It will be granted you. And what is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom, it will be done. And in verse 7, Esther answered, my petition and my request is, if I have found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and to act on my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I will hold for them tomorrow. And tomorrow I will do as the king says. So the king says, whatever you say. And so here we have two people risen to power at the same time, Esther and Haman. And Haman is feeling really good about himself, like, wow, it's just me, the king, and the queen. He feels very privileged that really, he's feeling himself. But as he goes out and he sees Mordecai, he's filled with rage because Mordecai still won't bow to him, no matter how high he's risen in the kingdom. And so Haman decided, well, he was going to set up a large pole, 50 cubits high, and that he was going to hang Mordecai on it. So he's at the banquet, and now the king asked of the queen, what is your petition in chapter 7? And it will be granted to you. What is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom, it will be done. Well, what does Queen Esther request? Chapter 7, verse 3 says, Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be granted as my petition, and my people as my request. For we have been sold, and my people to be annihilated, killed, and destroyed. If we had simply been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept silent. But the distress is not proper, for it will be damaging to the king. Verse 5, King Ahasuerus then said to Queen Esther, who is this, and where is the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther said in verse 6 of chapter 7, the adversary and enemy is this evil Haman. Haman became terrified because of the king and the queen. And verse 7 says, the king rose up in a rage from the banquet of wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stood up to plead with Queen Esther for his life. for he realized that the king was determined to punish him. The king returned from the palace garden to the house of the wine banquet and saw that Haman had thrown himself on the couch where Esther was. The king exclaimed, "Is he also going to rape the queen in my own house?" As soon as these words left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Harbona, one of the king's court officials, now said, "Haman also prepared a steak for Mordecai, whose report saved the king. It is standing at Haman's house, 50 cubits high." At that the king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the stake that he had prepared for Mordecai, and the king's rage subsided. See, he didn't know what he didn't know. So here we have two people rising in power, unknown to each one of them, that they would be in conflict, and only one would walk away alive. And Haman didn't know that this very special woman to the king was one that he had wanted genocide for, cost him his life. Racism and hatred can blind a person to the real situation of what they're dealing with. You don't know what you don't know. But when you go out and spread hatred and division, and you're about getting people, hating people, you don't care if they've done right or wrong. You just don't love them because of their race, and you want to obliterate them. This could bring you upon the same situation that Haman had. What did Jesus say at Mark 3:35? The ones that do the will of my Father are my brother, sister, and mother. So he's telling you, they're my family members. If they're doing the will of my Father, that's my family member you're dealing with. And the thing about it is this: those doing the will of Jesus' Father are from all nations. Because isn't that what his disciples were to do? Go to all nations and make such ones, these disciples, that will be doing the will of the Father. So if you're racist and you just hate this people here, you're like bad Haman, you just want to get rid of them, you don't know what you don't know. That the very person that you enslaved, that you brutalized, that you told to get to the back of the bus, that you lynched, that you lied on, that you refused to give justice to, that you discriminate against. Just like Haman, you don't know what you don't know. One of those people could be Christ's family member. And what did he say in Matthew 25? You do it to them, you're doing it to me. So if you do it to them, so you don't know which one of them, just like Haman, he didn't know that Esther was a Jew. You don't know which one that you're dealing with is a brother, a family member of Christ. And once you step across that line, just like King Ahasuerus, you're going to incite the rage of Jesus because you're doing it to one of his family members. You see, when you told them to go to the back of the bus, it's like you were telling Jesus to go to the back of the bus. When you told them you can't eat at this restaurant, it's like you telling Jesus he couldn't eat at that restaurant. When you told them they're 3/5 human, it's like you could have been telling Jesus he's 3/5 human because you don't know what you don't know. In Matthew 25, those that do this bad to his family members, so you're going off into everlasting cutting off. Jesus takes it personal.